help us understand what diabetes really is and the predisposing factors so we can stay safe and healthy. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Let's start with just breaking it down, because we know 500,000 of Ugandans actually living with diabetes, like you're telling me, and most of us have diabetes and we don't know. So break it down for us. What is diabetes, type 1 and type 2?
Yeah, diabetes is a disease condition that is largely brought about by the body's inability to handle glucose, or sugar as we call it. But in addition to the abnormal handling or lack of handling of glucose, there are so many other things that go wrong, particularly with how you handle your cholesterol or fats in the blood, how you handle your carbohydrates, how you handle your food, how you handle the water, and it leads so many abnormalities that go beyond just the sugar. So basically, many of our problems start from us calling it a sugar disease, when actually there are so many things that are going wrong other than the sugar. But one of the principal functions is that the body, because of its loss of production of insulin from the pancreas gland, or the inability of that insulin to act, it cannot handle glucose appropriately, in addition to other nutrients in the body, like the fats and the cholesterols and the waters and the vitamins and the like.
Okay, so diabetes type 1 and type 2 are totally different. How different are they?
Actually, we have more than type 1 and type 2.
Okay.
The world keeps changing. But in type 1 diabetes, what happens is that there are what you call antibodies, or self-antibodies, that destroy the pancreas, usually of a young child. It peaks at about the time of puberty. And these antibodies, we may not know where they come from, but they are within the body of this child. So these antibodies, these are proteins that destroy the cells of the pancreas that normally secrete insulin. And unfortunately, in this form of diabetes, they destroy everything. They wipe out the entire pancreas cells that secrete insulin. And so the child has zero insulin production.
So the child is born with it?
No, not really. It usually develops a little later on.
Okay.
We see it at any age, really, but it's not born with it, because the antibodies form later in life. There is some genetic predisposition to who produces the antibodies and who doesn't produce them. And there are quite a number of antibodies, not just one type. So these children, we used to call them insulin-dependent diabetes. We dropped that term. But they are flat on insulin, they have zero insulin, and so we treat them with insulin. So right from the time of diagnosis, right from the time we know, until the rest of their lives, they have to be on insulin. So that is type 1 diabetes.
Okay.
And they easily go into coma when the blood sugars are high. Then type 2 diabetes, which constitutes the bigger proportion of diabetics worldwide, and even here in Uganda, more than 90%, is a mixed disorder. In fact, now we are talking of subtypes of type 2 diabetes.
Subtypes?
Yes.
Type 2 diabetes?
Yes, it's a mixed disorder where you find that the initial problem is not lack of insulin, but the initial problem is what we call insulin resistance. The insulin is there, but it just doesn't work. So there is a problem at the cell level, the level of the cells. We have what we call insulin receptors. So insulin has to attach onto the receptors for these cells to work and take in glucose and use it. So what happens with insulin resistance is that you either don't have the receptors, what we call downregulation, or you have them but they just don't work. And then we also have what we call post-receptor defects. You have the receptors, they work, but beyond the receptor, inside the cell, the insulin is not working. So we call that insulin resistance. And many factors lead to insulin resistance. For example, when you are obese, when you put on a lot of weight, you become insulin resistant. If you have a disease condition that brings obesity or overweight, you also get type 2 diabetes. And that's why you find any insulin-resistant state can bring you type 2 diabetes. But the biggest problem is being overweight and lack of physical activity. Because when you do physical activity, you increase the number of receptors, you increase the functioning of these receptors, and that's why you find that when people are not active, they are basically resistant to insulin. When people are physically active, they are making their insulin receptors work better, even before you bring in drugs. So that is largely type 2 diabetes. And also the other factor about type 2 diabetes is growing older.
Oh.
So all of us lose 1% of those cells in the pancreas that produce insulin. As you grow older, you lose 1%. Meaning that if all of us were to grow, let's say to 200 years, all of us will be diabetic. So the older you grow, the less of the pancreas cells you have that secrete insulin. But every year you lose 1%. Unfortunately, when you are diabetic, every year you lose 7%. And that's why when you begin as type 2 diabetes, in the beginning you don't need insulin because you have the insulin but it doesn't work.
Right.
So we give you drugs to make your insulin work better. But later on, usually after 15 years or so, even the insulin production goes down, even though you have type 2 diabetes.
Right.
And so that's why you find that diabetics who have been on with the disease for a long time also need insulin. So whereas the normal person loses 1% of pancreas cells, insulin production per year, a diabetic loses 7% per year.
That's a lot. And, and like you said, also age plays a key factor to this.
That's right.
Will supplements help me? Because we're all going to grow old, but if I take supplements just to facilitate that particular process of the loss of the pancreatic cells, will it help me?
The issue of supplements hasn't been studied conclusively.
Okay.
And so one wouldn't say that, yes, when you take this supplement, it needs further work and further research. But basically, apart from type 1 and type 2, we also have what we call other forms of diabetes, which are very common in this country. Any disease that attacks the pancreas will most likely bring diabetes. For example, HIV, the virus attacks the pancreas and destroys it.
Right.
Drugs that treat HIV, some of the ARVs, and that's why they were removed from the market. Drugs like stavudine, what we call protease inhibitors, these were removed because they bring diabetes. So there are also other drugs. For example, you've heard of what they call steroids. People use steroids for lightening themselves. Many Ugandan women like to be brown and lighter. They don't know that black is beautiful.
Right.
And so they lighten themselves. So skin lightening creams that have steroids like Mediven and clobetasol and the like, these can bring diabetes. And then also people who have allergies, who have asthma, who have joint diseases, they take a lot of dexamethasone and prednisone. And these steroids actually fight against insulin. These are hormones actually. And then the other diseases like goiters that secrete hormones like thyroxine. And then we have some diseases in the adrenal gland that secrete adrenaline. And these fight against insulin. Actually, most hormones in the body fight against insulin. Common drugs like contraceptive pills can also fight against insulin.
Contraception?
Yeah.
The pills?
The pills, yeah, they are
So
steroids.
how do you get to, because there's a huge conversation about family planning and contraception.
Yeah.
So how do we go about knowing that this pill is actually safe for me?
You have to select the patient now, because there are some patients who can have some pills and they can have Depo-Provera and they won't be affected. But if you're already overweight and you are a little old and then you are taking these steroid hormones for contraception, it's not a good idea.
So what you're saying is that women and couples need to seek advice before they go over the counter to get pills.
Yeah, what we need to emphasize here is that everybody is different.
Right.
In diabetes, we talk of individualization. So there's advice you give one person that you not give the other. There's counseling you give a person that you tell somebody differently. So one of the problems we have in the community is where diabetes is taken as a single disease. There are actually various forms of diabetes. We have so many types and subtypes, as I mentioned. The fourth subtype is what we call gestational diabetes. This is the diabetes that occurs the first time when a woman is pregnant. The hormones that sustain a pregnancy are steroid hormones, and they come in huge amounts from the placenta, and they're the hormones that enable a lady to put on weight, they enable the lady for prepare her for breastfeeding and the like. So these are steroids, so they fight against insulin. So about 4 to 7% of pregnant women will get diabetes sometime during the pregnancy, usually in the mid part to the late part of the pregnancy.
But after you give birth, do you go back to normal? Most
people will go back to normal, but when they hit 40 years and above, they are prone to getting type 2 diabetes.
Is it the reason why, as medics, you always advise women to get pregnant in their early age, as opposed to, you know, getting pregnant when at
That's just one of the factors. There are so many other factors why a lady should have children earlier, but that is one of them.
Okay.
Definitely, women who are above 40 years of age will have a lot of insulin resistance when they are pregnant.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Doctor, I have to ask you this question. Is diabetes curable? If I'm diagnosed with either type 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever type of diabetes, can it be cured?
Well, if what you mean by cure is eradication, the answer is no at this point in time. But a lot of work is going on to see how we can get cure for diabetes. For example, research is being done on what we call stem cell transplantation, where, yes, you're a child, you've lost your pancreas from the antibodies. Can we transplant you with another pancreas? The danger then will be that the antibodies in you will still destroy the second one. But work is going on to see whether we can have pancreatic transplantation. A lot of surgical procedures are also being done for type 2 diabetes, what we call gastric bypass surgery, where we can cut off part of the stomach, and then you eat less food, or you eat less meals, and your weight rapidly goes down. In some patients, we've been able to render them non-diabetic for quite a long time, but it's not 100% sure, really. But for this point in time, we don't have 100% eradication or cure for diabetes.
Right. When you say cut off part of the stomach, does it mean reducing practically the size of the stomach?
Yeah, we can do what we call banding, where we put a staple on the stomach so that when you eat, you are satisfied early. Or we can actually cut away part of the stomach and attach the remaining part to the intestines.
Wow.
And then you eat food, and you eat less food, and it works very well. Okay. And it's available in Uganda at Mulago Hospital.
Wow. Wow. Let's talk about then, now that we know that it's not cured, you cannot cure diabetes at this point in time, as much as a lot of research is going into that. Let's talk about managing that. I'm diabetic, for example, I'm diabetic. I have to manage this disease across all types. What are the do's and don'ts?
I think the main issue, the very first point, is patient education. We say in diabetes care that the patient becomes part of the management team. It's like soccer, it's like playing football. Really, everybody matters. Even the fun matters in winning a football game. So in diabetes care, the key person is the client, the patient. As I mentioned before, every diabetic is different. There are diabetics who are very thin, they may be told to eat more food. There are diabetics who are very overweight, obese, and need to be told to eat less. So you can't have one message for all. There are diabetics who are 12 years, there are those who are 70, 80, they're totally different people. So you must have an individual patient-tailored message. Each sort of package it for that individual. And then the patient must be in the know What is this disease? Why did I get it? How did I get it? What should I do? Now, once you don't harness the involvement of the patient, the rest is a wastage of time. Because diabetes, unlike so many other diseases, affects you minute by minute. What you do in the bedroom, what you do in the bathroom, what you do in the sitting room, what you do on the road, what you do in the class, it just affects you minute by minute. You can be smiling and driving your vehicle, you could be dead in the next 10 minutes.
Wow.
You could be, everything can go so quickly from bad to worse. We've had diabetics attending parties and they say, let me eat just once. That just once eating can mean death. Or we have had diabetics say, well, I feel like not having this meal. Just missing a meal can make a person who has been controlled for 10 years dying in the next 2 hours. Just that simple. So everything is important. That's why we begin by saying, involve the client. Individualize the management platform for that client. And motivate the client. As I mentioned, diabetes affects you every minute. It's you, the patient, it's your body, not the doctor's body. And so, as doctors, we write things on papers. Writing something on a paper and telling the patient, go get your drugs and go home is totally meaningless in diabetes care. You must sit down with the patient and agree. There are compromises to be made. Like I'll give an example. If you have a 4-year-old child diabetic, stopping this child from tasting ice cream doesn't make sense. Right. It will still taste the ice cream. So you have to really motivate this person specific to that person. So information delivery.
So what doctor is saying before we go to the other point is it will be even hard for you to even tell us the forms of managing and how we go about managing right here on television. Because every case is special.
That's right.
And every case will be managed differently.
Differently, yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, but we can just mention the most important things.
Okay.
As people have been mentioned, the basic building blocks of diabetes management, apart from patient education, is the lifestyle change. To a good extent, diabetes is both a genetic disorder, it's an aging disorder, but it's also a lifestyle disorder, or a problem in which lifestyle brings it, and also lifestyle affects how you go about it. So, for example, a regular physical exercise program. We emphasize at least 30 minutes of aerobic exercises 6 days in a week. Of course, some diabetics will tell you, I ran 10 kilometers on Saturday, and then the rest of the day I'm beside a computer. That is wrong. It must be regular aerobic exercises, not weightlifting, but aerobic exercises like slow walking, fast walking, running, jogging, swimming, dancing, bicycling. Of course, the problem we have in Kampala, it's difficult to send somebody to ride a bicycle in Kampala. It's very nice in Amsterdam, for example, where they have bicycle lanes and the like. But we tell our clients to walk around their houses, run around their houses, all kinds of things. We have a lot of issues with walking on Kampala streets. And that is where we appeal to urban authorities. As part of the management of diabetes, they have to come in, create walking lanes for pedestrians.
Right, bicycle lanes.
Yeah, bicycle lanes, exercise programs that have to be, for example, one sad thing, we've talked to a number of teachers and they tell us that PE, or physical exercise, was either removed from the curriculum or it's there but it's not implemented. So even the teachers would benefit from exercising with their children.
Right.
In fact, we have quite a lot of teachers in their 40 years, 50 years who are getting diabetes because they no longer exercise, they no longer do physical exercise with the children, and so they just get fat and obese, and they're turning up in big numbers in the schools.
Okay.
One particular institution that has been very good at maintaining a physical exercise program is the Army. For the military, they are very good. They are very fine, and you don't find diabetics in the Army as much as you find it in the general population.
Because they're always active.
That's right. Then there are other things like one bad thing you can do to yourself, whether you're diabetic or not, is smoking.
Explain that to us, because people will say that smoking maybe can affect my lungs at the worst, and I don't smoke so frequently. So how does that relate to diabetes, doctor?
Oh, smoking can cause diabetes. Very, very easily. Actually, the nicotine and other substances in the cigarette smoke directly affect the cells of the pancreas. Nicotine and other substances in cigarettes also cause insulin resistance. But in addition, nicotine and other substances in cigarette smoke accelerate the complications of diabetes. So if you're a smoker and you're diabetic, instead of losing your sight in 30 years, you're going to lose it in, let's say, 3 months.
Wow.
If you're a smoker and you're diabetic, you're going to lose the blood supply to your feet very quickly. We call it peripheral vascular disease. And then if you're a smoker and you're diabetic, you're going to get cancer much faster. The lung cancer you talk about is just an example. Smokers get cancers literally everywhere, in the throat, in the stomach. Smoking predisposes to cancer. But if you're diabetic as well, then your risk multiplies even 10 times.
Okay, so you've mentioned smoking. I know the other big conversation is on diet.
Yeah.
How do them that are not yet diabetic, how do they go about?
Just before we go to that, there's also alcohol. We know that Uganda is one of the leading nations in the whole world in alcohol intake. We are number 8 in the world, and sometimes we are number 1 in Africa. And alcohol directly destroys the cells of the pancreas. In fact, if you are diabetic, for example, in type 2 diabetes, you've lost more than 70% of the cells of the pancreas at the time when diabetes is known to occur. So if you take alcohol, you destroy the remaining 30%. Gradual, of course, not in one day. So taking lots of alcohol can injure a diabetic.
All right.
And also the one who is not diabetic, you can also destroy the pancreas.
So we need to keep off smoking, keep off alcohol.
That's right.
And in terms of diet, what do we do to prevent ourselves from getting to that point where we're now diagnosed
so
with diabetes?
In terms of diabetes, particularly for type 2 diabetes, this is where it becomes important. Type 2 diabetes doesn't just come boom. Before you are known to have diabetes, or before you present with symptoms, the weight loss, the feeling weak, the passing too much urine, loss of vision, loss of interest in sex and the like. Before that happens, things are going on 10 to 8 years before that.
Wow.
So people go through what we call the pre-diabetic stage. They may feel nothing, and they feel healthy. And for every diabetic you see in hospital, there are 4 to 5 people in that stage of pre-diabetes. And that's why when you're preventing diabetes, you go to the pre-diabetic stage. You go to the general population. You don't go to Chirudo Hospital. You don't go to Mulago Hospital. You go out where the people are, in their offices, in their markets, in their homes. You go to Owino and prevent diabetes from there.
Are you able to tell that in the pre-diabetic
stage?
Yes,
it's very easy to tell that you're in the pre-diabetic stage.
How is that?
We have a test we call the oral glucose tolerance test, that we test your sugar in the morning before taking breakfast. And if your sugar is beyond 6 or beyond 100 on another measurement, we say you have pre-diabetes.
Okay, and can that be reversed if I'm in the pre-diabetic?
Yes.
Right.
If you have pre-diabetes, we can prevent up to a half of those people in the pre-diabetes stage from progressing to frank diabetes by doing exercise alone, without any drug, just exercise and weight loss. More than 50% will be prevented.
Interesting.
We can also prevent about 1/3 if we use a drug called metformin. We give it to you, and you don't develop, or you don't proceed from pre-diabetes to diabetes.
Okay.
Also, the gastric bypass surgery I talked about.
Yeah.
If we band your stomach, or if you do lifestyle changes yourself, many people are able to do that.
Right.
Then you remain pre-diabetic for the rest of your life.
Okay. Doctor, we're running out of time, but I need you to tell us this as we come to a close. The cost of treating diabetes and managing it, because it's not treatment, it's actually management.
The cost will vary, but it will be very high once a complication set in. But roughly speaking, in Uganda, a patient that has no complications requires about 400,000 shillings per month.
Per month?
For the direct medical costs. And if there are complications, you need about 1 million shillings per month.
Wow.
In some cases where you have to be admitted, where you have to have surgeries, which can be on any part of the body, because diabetes complications move from head to toe.
Right.
They can be very, very big. You've heard about the kidney, for example, in Uganda. The leading cause of kidney failure is diabetes. So people have to get kidney transplants, people have to get dialysis. These are very high costs.
So it's very expensive.
It's very expensive.
So as we come to a close, I need you to talk to us. Tell us what we need to do and why it's important to even change our lifestyles altogether.
Yeah, the appeal to us as Ugandans is to be careful of our own individual lives. There are things we can't change. We can't change our age. Many of us would like to live older. But there are things that we can change. We can change particularly two things. One is physical activity. We need to urgently increase our level of physical activity. It's very lacking. Even in situations where there's a lift, people who can walk on the steps, they take the lift and they miss that chance, that opportunity. In our society here, when people see you walking, they think you are poor. We need to change as a culture and say it's better to be physically fit and alive than to be, pretend to be rich and driving cars. And if Ugandans had the chance, they would drive their car from the bedroom into the banking hall. So physical activity is very key. The last one, very important, is the food. Our staple foods in Uganda are high in carbohydrate. The posho, the rice, cassava, the millet, the yams, the Irish, the sweet potatoes. These are high in carbohydrate. We are one of the countries, the leading countries in the world, where we eat little protein and we eat a lot of starch, a lot of carbohydrate. And it's this carbohydrate that is translated into sugar. So we need to reduce on the carbohydrate and eat more of fiber, which is in the fruits, which is in the vegetables, and then reduce on the carbohydrates.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fred Nakwagala, Senior Consultant Physician at Mulago Hospital. Thank you so much for that knowledge. Very important. Be sure to share this video. Very important for all of us to just watch this and take note. So up next is actually Take Note with Flavia Tumusume. Keep it here.
NTV brings you the first economic summit in 2016 and the second in 2017, geared at finding ways to kickstart Uganda's economy and have growth with jobs.
How do we stimulate demand? You can stimulate demand in two ways.
At the NTV Economic Summit, we do not lament or just cry about